Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. There's not many surefire winning political strategies, but one political stance that many politicians love to run to is to be the candidate who's running against black people. And that brings us to the mushmouth mayor of New York City, Officer Eric Adams, NYC's overseer-in-chief. New York City got rid of cash bail for misdemeanor and nonviolent charges a couple of years ago. A common-sense approach to the blatantly racist judges who impose imprisonment for black defendants while allowing white criminals to be released. White supremacists in the government and the media claimed that if this was put in place, why every criminal would be out committing crimes nonstop, day and night, 24/7. Recidivism would go through the roof. As soon as you let one criminal go, why they would immediately go and murder someone. Well, after 2 years, the data is in, and it shows that only 2% of those released on non-cash bail went on to commit violent crimes. Speaking of which, I already showed you in an earlier video that the NYPD itself said that crime was higher in 2020 and the years before than it is in 2021, and yet all of last year was dominated by white media hysteria about crime. The white media trying to make it seem as if everybody's getting murdered in America. But it's not until you actually parse the data and look at what it is the white media is talking about that you see that it's not murders, rapes, and assaults that are through the roof. It's actually the non-violent crimes or non-lethal crimes that are high. And keep in mind, this is cyclical. While certainly not pleasant, there is a fact that every 15 to 20 years or so, you do get a crime spike. It happens every 15 to 20 years. But in this case, you got the white media trying to manufacture hysteria about violent crime when the truth is it's just crime in general that's up. But the white media leaves that part out because they want to conflate the two and make you think it's the exact same thing. This is a message that the white media wants out there. Black people have forced changes onto the system, and now the white supremacists are attempting to reverse those changes. But first, they have to lay a foundation of lies. They have to manufacture a climate of irrational fear, make sure that people are scared, and most importantly, make sure that black people are the face of crime so everybody knows what the target is. Everybody knows who they're ganging up on. And the bootlicking scumbag Eric Adams, who is clearly trying to make it obvious to the white power brokers and money men and influence peddlers in New York that they need to back him for higher office. He's campaigning hard as hell for whatever job it is that he's hoping to get next, be it governor or senator or what have you. This is what he's trying to do. He's trying to make his bones on that one, and he intends to make his bones by attempting to demonize black people as much as possible. He wants to make it clear, hey guys, I am on the team. You need to give me money, lots of money, because I'm going to be hard on them niggas. This moron hasn't even been in office for 2 whole months yet, and he's already making some unholy crusade out of trying to find any incident where there is a black suspect in a violent crime that he can glom onto and try to use that as a platform to pressure the lawmakers in Albany to do what he says, in this case, reinstate cash bail. But he only does that if he can connect it to a black person. There is no crime involving a white suspect that he's out there on his white horse for, saying, we need to change some laws. Now, this is why we need to change some laws. We need to consider the dangerousness of a suspect. He doesn't do that, not if it's a white person. So this is how you know that this is AstroTurf. Same as the ridiculous parade that took place in New York a couple of weeks ago. You had that cop who was killed, and you had another one who was wounded, and the suspect in these shootings was black. The white supremacists in the NYPD, like Patrick Lynch, America's most corrupt, crooked cop, they knew that they could not get out there and push the line of, and this is why you got to make sure that you bring back qualified immunity in New York, and you got to make sure that black folks are locked up. And you don't question us when we kill black people. Why? Anything we do is right. They know that they can't do that. It won't work, won't sell. The climate is all against them. Social climate is against that. So what they're doing instead is they got their meat puppet, Officer Eric Adams, to get out there and sell the soap instead. What you saw in New York a couple of weeks ago, that was nothing more than political theater. The police are selectively outraged. You had a whole lot of cops who apparently were able to tear themselves away from the Dunkin' Donuts counter, and they waddled their way to New York City. And here they are. We are going to take part in this parade because we want to show our solidarity, and we want to show that police, you should know what a dangerous job we do. There is no job in America more dangerous than being black, and it is precisely because of the police that being black is so dangerous. But have you ever seen Eric Adams or any of these other white mayors, or black mayors for that matter? Have you ever seen them attending the funerals of any of the people who their police have murdered? You see Eric Adams showing up for the funeral of some person who the cops have killed and say, I want to show solidarity with the family? No. It doesn't matter if half the city turns out for the murder of a black person. The mayor makes sure that he never does. Doesn't matter if it's Eric Adams or de Blasio or certainly not Bloomberg or any of the garbage before him. None of these guys show up because they want to make it very clear. We're not about to show solidarity with you over the thugs in blue. We're not doing that. But this is the hysteria train that you've got a lot of individuals who are trying to push, but apparently it ain't got as much steam as they thought. Because in the most recent incident that they're deciding to make a cause celeb out of, you had an Asian woman who was allegedly murdered by some black suspect, who, by the way, the guy's name, I can barely even pronounce it, but phonetically it's Asamad Nash. I mean, you can look at the guy, and not even his name. You're able to look at the guy. This guy is clearly from the islands. This guy is clearly an immigrant. You're able to look at this guy as like, okay, he ain't from around these parts, but he is black. And that's the most important thing. That's all that matters here. All that matters is, as long as we got a black person, now we can go ahead and push for this policy because we have a black face that we can attach the advocacy to. We have a black person that we can claim that this is in reaction to, and everybody knows, okay, this is what we're getting behind, guys. Officer Eric Adams was able to tear his lips away from Patrick Lynch's hairy, pale, crusty rump just long enough for him to make his way to Albany and yeah, we need to have Cash Bail tweaked. I'm just saying tweak it. I ain't saying get rid of it. We need to have it tweaked. What does tweaked mean? We need to get rid of it. That's what it means. We need to make sure that if a black person is accused of a crime, they ain't getting out of jail until they have been found not guilty by a jury of white folks from Staten Island. I mean, I'm a jury of their peers. That's what he's doing. He was down in Albany, but apparently they gave his asinine little stunt, his little political theater, thumbs down. Obviously, Officer Eric Adams is trying to shore up his support with as many non-black voters and non-black constituencies as he can. He's making it clear to everyone that he intends for his road to higher office to be paved with as many black people behind bars as he possibly can. He's at war, not with crime, but with black people. Because at no point does he say, you know what, there's a lot of judges who have been using their position in order to selectively incarcerate and selectively punish black people. So obviously the problem here isn't crime. We need laws so we can punish those judges, laws that make it where we can very easily have them removed from the bench and have charges put against them. He's not calling for laws like that. He's not doing any of that kind of advocacy. He's not making it clear that every single 6 months to a year, every judge is going to have their entire docket reviewed so we can see whether or not they have been carrying out cases and giving rulings in a racially biased manner. We can compare how the black defendants are treated in their court to how white defendants are treated. We can see whether or not there's bias. He's not doing that. Nobody's putting a standard in place where you're actually holding judges accountable. So before you go talking about tweaking anything, you need to make sure you deal with the problem first. But that's the thing. As far as Eric Adams and the white supremacists back of him are concerned, the deliberate selective racism by judges against black people, that's not the problem. That's the solution. And they want to make sure that it remains in place. Eric Adams reportedly got rebuffed by New York State legislature, though even the people who were reportedly opposed to reinstating the old cash bail policies, they said that there were discussions that needed to happen and they needed all the facts. That scumbag needed to be turned down flat, no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, Eric Adams is being supported by the usual suspects among New York's white supremacists. That means the rabid racist trash in Staten Island. So Officer Adams is clearly trying to appeal to garbage like Michael Bloomberg, rich bigots who will give money to whomever is willing to attack the black community. That's the audience that he's performing for. That's the audience whose attention he wants. Officer Eric Adams is marching boldly in the fetid, pathetic footsteps of Michael Bloomberg. I guess Officer Adams doesn't remember what ultimately happened to Michael Bloomberg. See, the so-called power brokers in New York, they've bought into their own hype. In their minds, New York City is the center of the universe. New York City rules the world. Only it doesn't. New York City is an important city for the world of finance, but outside of that, New York City ain't spit. No offense to my New York folks, but the point that I'm trying to make is New York City is not the center of the universe. It's the center of the media world because so many of the media companies are headquartered in New York City. And of course, you got finance that happens to have that as their central hub. So you have a self-reinforcing mechanism where the self-centered, egotistical egomaniacs who want to tell themselves they're so important, they own media companies that can tell them that they're so important, they're the center of the universe. And since this is what a lot of people see, it becomes a self-reinforcing mechanism. People see that, they say it, the guys who hear it go, that's right, you're affirming what we believe. People buy into a fiction. Sure, the white media has the resources necessary to make that fiction sexy or interesting or even appear to have some thin veneer of sophistication to it. But it's still a myth. It ain't real. New York City is not a tech hub. It's not a manufacturing hub. It's the epitome of the service sector, particularly the financial services. That means it doesn't produce anything. And the men who get treated like royalty in New York City, especially we're talking about principally Manhattan, they can't even get the time of day once they step outside of Manhattan, which is why so few of them ever leave their high-rise condos or high-rise corporate offices. Let's just tell it like it is. The game that trash like Bloomberg and now Officer Eric Adams want to play, that game only works inside of their little bubble. It's like Kamala Harris. As long as she had low-down Willie Brown and the California political machine to hand her patronage jobs, to spoon-feed her political offices like the DA's office or the State Attorney General's office or the U.S. Senate, she was fine. But as soon as she stepped outside of the cozy confines of California, where her state's political machine had no influence, she got crushed, and it wasn't even a contest. Michael Bloomberg learned the same humiliating lesson when he went down to Alabama. He went to Brown Chapel AME Church, had some bootlick pulpit pimp, some scumbag pork chop preacher who was going to let him use that black congregation as a backdrop for a photo op, and next thing you know, the congregants stood up, as they should, and turned their backs on that scumbag. And what was supposed to be Michael Bloomberg's glorious PR stunt turned out to be the death knell for his would-be presidential campaign. He thought that once he got outside of New York City, stop and frisk wouldn't follow him, except it did. He thought to himself that because he was such a big shot in New York City, why, these corn-pone country Negroes, they'll be falling at my feet. All I have to do is say I'm a white man from New York City, and they'll just be kissing my behind, and they'll be bowing and scraping. And instead, what happened was those black congregants told him, we know exactly who you are, Bloomberg, and you ain't in New York City anymore. They crushed his campaign in a single moment. But of course, what happened is what usually happens when you're dealing with entrenched monetary power. If the scumbags are not able to get their way on their own, then they'll simply find some stalking horse, some puppet, who they'll put out there to do it for them, and that's where Eric Adams comes in. He's carrying out the Democrats' strategy of attracting non-black support so that they can try to create a new voter base, one that is not going to leave them vulnerable to the influence and consequences that the black grassroots are inflicting. So please don't think that this mush-mouthed half-wit came up with this on his own. He's taking orders. Same way he did when he was a crooked cop in the NYPD, same way he did when he was a sniveling state senator in Albany. Eric Adams is a tool. That's all he is. That's all he can be. And this agenda that he's pushing, it was going on long before he got himself selected to be mayor of New York. Officer Adams knows what his job is, and that's to be the black tool to give cover to an anti-black agenda. He'll say the crap that his racist white paymasters can't say. This isn't about crime. It's about Eric Adams ingratiating himself with the anti-black forces of the white left. Remember, it was a black mayor who presided over the slaughter of Move in Philadelphia. It was a black mayor who presided over that city when the LA riots went down and refused to punish the police. You have a black mayor in San Francisco right now who's not doing anything about the police in that city targeting the few black residents who are left. And of course, Mayor London Breed hasn't done a thing to make it where black San Franciscans can meet the cost of living. Her job is to be the black face, presiding over and expediting the removal of black people from that city. And that's exactly what she's done. So black mayors who want to stay on the good side of their white paymasters, they understand that they better let the police kill black people with impunity and that they better make targeting black people their top priority. This is a form of confusing the internal politics of a particular group, because it's one thing when you have a particular outside group who is hostile toward you, but when they co-opt one of your own, well, now that's supposed to make it where you think if we can just prevail upon this person, we can just convince them, and you will waste a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort trying to get some tool of white supremacy to work against their true masters. And in many cases, what will happen is you'll have a lot of folks who just give up on resistance altogether. As far as they're concerned, they buy into the lie that, oh my God, we are hopelessly dysfunctional. Oh my God, we are hopelessly corrupt. No, what's happened is you have a dominant group in a society who has put their largely superior resources up against your minuscule resources, and they're able to flood the zone with a bunch of tools and flunkies and lackeys and bootlicks. That's what's happened here. Sure, we have an infestation of traitors and turncoats and scumbags, but guess what? There's more of us than there are of them. What's lacking here is will and focus. Officer Eric Adams and the white supremacists propping him up are trying to reinstate the old status quo. They've lost some ground, and they're trying to make that ground back up because a lot of these white supremacists have seen nationwide what happened in New York City, and that's the reason why you had so many of these racist police coming in from Boston and coming in from Philadelphia and coming in from Baltimore and all points in between. They've been showing up because as far as they were concerned, we got to show we're in solidarity against the niggers. That's what it actually is. We got to make sure that the NYPD understands they better hold the line on this one. Black people have already forced them back, and that was supposed to be impossible, and yet black people did it easily when they focused, so we got to show these niggers are up against a united white supremacist front. Right now, the bad guys are shook and scared. Their money failed to keep some of these changes from happening, and with all the massive hundreds of millions that they've put behind the thugs in blue and paid political whores like Officer Eric Adams, as far as they were concerned, they thought they had a bulletproof shield of white supremacist policy. But that shield got pierced, and they've already seen more stress fractures forming, and they're trying to stop this now. They don't want any more bricks taken away from that wall. Well, as I've told you, sooner or later, people are going to have to start focusing on these judges. There need to be laws that make it mandatory to review how these judges hand down sentences, and the same thing goes for the DAs. Judges and DAs need to undergo an annual, in fact, I would say quarterly review of how they handle the cases that they're supposed to be prosecuting or presiding over. Do you have DAs who systematically make it where black defendants get hit with the heaviest charges that they can while the white defendants are let go altogether? Judges who do the exact same thing. If it's a white defendant, we're going to go ahead and set aside the verdict or throw it out, or we're going to give this person time served. And if you're black, well, you were accused of jaywalking. Sure, the cops lied and there was no evidence that you even were in the city at the time, but we're giving you life in prison anyway. There need to be heavy prison sentences for judges who use their offices as a means of persecuting black people. And the same thing goes for DAs. Those are the next legal steps that must be taken. And what's happening now is they're trying to stop this one before it goes any farther. The police have already been stepped to. The police have already been shown qualified immunity is not going to be some distraction for the people. We can have you bastards locked up with or without qualified immunity in place. Now it's time to turn our attention to the other two operatives in the judicial lynching of black people, the DAs and the judges, particularly those judges. Because once the judges have been put on notice, those animals are going to be looking and going, whoa, this DA who's bringing this case in here, I can already tell he's thinking to himself that we're going to be locking up another black person with no real basis for it. I'm going to stop this because I don't want to get in trouble. It's like that old legal saying that Robert Cooley quoted. It's more important to know the judge than it is to know the law. You start putting the fear of the people into these judges. You start making it very clear you're going to be undergoing judicial review. We're going to compare how you handle the cases with black defendants to what you do when there's white defendants. And all of a sudden, you're going to see a whole lot of these white supremacists suddenly deciding to take early retirement, suddenly deciding they don't want to be in the judge business anymore. We can run the white supremacists out. We can purge the white supremacists. That must be on the agenda. But we're the ones who are going to have to put it there. And we have to get realistic about the fact that you're going to have white supremacy using its money to prop up black sock puppets to tell us, y'all's going too far now. We need to be understanding now. They're going to have these morons out here advocating for the bad guys, advocating for the enemy. Eric Adams is pushing the anti-black agenda as he said that he would. This is not a surprise. He ran on an open platform that he was going to go after black people. So black New Yorkers have to make a political example out of him to show that they can and will push back. Because once Eric Adams has been politically humbled, humiliated, and thrown out of office, he's going to find out, just like all these bootlicks do, that the same Bloombergs and the same white power brokers who are willing to float them some money for their political campaigns, they're not going to be willing to hang out with these guys afterwards. Massa loves to use his tools. But that doesn't mean that he loves the tool itself. And mark my words, should the black New Yorkers flex on Officer Eric Adams and break this guy's political back, I can promise you, just like all the other bootlicks, he'll come slithering back to black folks and he'll be saying, oh, I was never down with them white supremacists. That was just media spin and they took things out of context. He'll do like they always do. And we'll leave that moron in the garbage can of history. Because that's what you do with trash. Good day and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Larry Amayo, Morris Bodden, D. Ryan, Sharon Shabalela, and Racer Bow. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.